We'll talk about post-harvest weed management of resistant weeds, mainly focusing on corn and a little bit of grain sorghum due to the time of the year that we harvest the crop, being in August, the amount of time that you have afterwards. So we'll dive right in. This is what many cornfields look like after we harvest almost immediately. If you think about a corn crop, generally it's pretty clean early in the year. Come to June, when it starts to dry down, sunlight goes down through the canopy, start getting that green sheen down to the middle of the rows. When you harvest the corn, this is what you're faced with. Numerous different weed species, from grass to pigweeds, morning glories, tea weeds, so on and so forth. And the problem is how they're going to affect you next year. So a lot of what we're talking about, guys, is an investment. Are you willing to invest into the next year? So let's take, for example, harvest. Got the third, you can harvest in the third week, the fourth week of August, September 1, September 2nd. So you can see how it rolls across here. Here's the time frame before you get the first killing frost. Sometimes we'll have one in October. More likely it occurs in the month of November. So we harvest the third week of August. We got 9 to 12 weeks before killing frost. If you harvest the fourth week, 8 to 11, 7 to 10 September, 6 to 9 in September. That is plenty enough time for some of these weed species to produce viable seed, have seed rain, essentially emerge again and start over. Now, why? Weed seed. Take barnyard grass. Why is barnyard grass an issue? Well, barnyard grass is an issue because substantial amount of resistance to rice herbicides. We have concern about glyphosate starting to be weak on it. If you think about where you've tank mixed glyphosate and dicamba and extend soybeans or extend cotton, we've seen the poor control we've had in barnyard grass is one of those. Well, post-harvest weeds management is a plan to reduce that weed seed so we can help ourselves in subsequent crops. It flowers out until October. Emergence of seed production is about 42 days. So remember, I said anyway, out to 12 weeks is sometime. So how many sequences of 42 days? That's a lot, okay? At least 2.5 that we can have just brand new seed. It makes about roughly 42,000 seeds per plant. So if you control 90% of them, 95% of them, there's still 5%. So 5% of 42,000, 9,000 or so, that can still cause you, or 900 or so, that can still cause you problems. Johnson grass, growth of the rhizomes at 60-degree soil temperature. Seeds, 70-degree soil temperature. Seedlings are capable of producing rhizomes within 3 to 4 weeks. And then if you run any kind of late tillage through there, you're just spreading it, because you can cut a rhizome into a segment about this long and you're just making new plants. And I'll tell you, one of the best things I found for rhizome Johnson grass control was feral hogs. I don't know why, but they love to eat on rhizomes. 30,000 seed per plant. So we can see, look at these numbers, guys, that we can have after we shell our corn. When we're moving on to soybeans, we're not even thinking about it. The problems that we're giving ourselves over time. Brown top millet. As the days get shorter, it flowers earlier. So it's going to emerge, and as we go through the season, it's flowering faster, producing viable seed. Typically, it's 60 days from emergence to seed production. About 1,500 seed per acre. So significantly less than you would have with barnyard grass or even Johnson grass, but it's still quite problematic. This is the #1 problem generally from Catahoula and south following corn, is brown top millet. It is severe. Dove hunters love it. Dove hunters love it, but it's quite problematic. Next one is prickly side or tea weed. We don't ever think about that, do we? Until we don't control it. Then it's a lot of heartburn. Can't emerge out until October, about 3,000 seed per plant. Really, really difficult to control, so we got to manage it. The biggest one, and really the driver, is Palmer amaranth. up to 1 million seed per plant. Flowering is day length sensitive. So that's who has seen a little plant emerging like this and it's got a spike on it about that tall. That's because day length, the shorter day lengths trigger it and cause it to begin to flower. Seed to flower is 2 to 3 weeks. Flower to seed is about 2 to 3 weeks. So in 2 to 3 weeks, it's got a flower after emergence, and then another 2 to 3 weeks. So 4 to 6 weeks, so approximately a month, you can have viable seed on the plant. So I just told you possibly at the max in 12 weeks. How many cycles is that? It's 3 months. 3 separate cycles of plants producing potentially up to 1 million seed. It's quite daunting when you think about it. Can't produce viable seed within 35 days of the first frost. So we're in the middle of October. You're getting viable seed. Seed produced in 2 weeks of pollen shed. Seed produced from plants less than 6 inches tall. We just described that. And then even plants that emerged in mid to late October produced 10 to 20 seed. And the seeds are the size of the ball of a ballpoint pen. This is the driver. And we can't really lie to ourselves and say we don't have this issue, because we do. Do we look like Arkansas? No. Do we look like the Delta, Mississippi? No. But the guys that have this problem have it, and it's quite difficult. So this right here, guys, and look, this is rampant. You'll drive through Louisiana after corn is harvested, and you'll see this out there. And it may just be 1, or there may be 2. Right there. I just described to you what this 1 or 2 can do. And this one's got a head start. And that's when they start to emerge. Because any herbicide that you apply in corn in March or April is not going to last until you harvest in August. The EPA is not going to let us have a herbicide that'll do that. Generally it begins to play out maybe 6 weeks out. So now we're into May, 1st of June. What's going on? Start to pollinate, dries down, herbicide's gone, weeds emerge. They sit there underneath that canopy waiting. You remove the sunlight, they take off. So if this one is ignored, you only got 5 plants to the acre. That's pretty low. 400,000 seed per plant. That's pretty low. You're depositing 2 million seed per acre. 2 million seed per acre. By just letting it grow. By moving on and ignoring it. When you think about it like that, that's pretty daunting. The guy said, well, I don't have pigweeds, Daniel. There ain't a pigweed in this field. But there's some sedge right there, some copperleaf, there's some morning glories out there, some other things. I don't have it. Good, but the challenge is to keep it that way. But there's plenty of other ways that you can produce. Barnyard grass, I've described to you. Morning glories. Morning glories can produce up to a couple thousand seed per plant. Prickly side of large crabgrass. We don't think about large crabgrass anymore because it's so susceptible to glyphosate. Great. Well, we're not putting glyphosate on this, and it's emerging, and we're just giving more grass problems. You guys are facing 2+ grass species a year, and can be up to 6 different broadleaf species a year that you have to deal with. That's one of the reasons we've always had to have kind of a broad herbicide spectrum, use multiple modes of action just to manage the weeds versus other neighbors. Just because you don't have a pigweed does not mean that you're just making trouble for yourself down the road. Down the road. What to do? There is no magic bullet. There is no glyphosate. This is not 1996 where you can get glyphosate and spray it out a 90-foot boom and you're done. There is nothing. You got to do what's practical for your operation. Using other weeds as a mulch against pigweed is an option. You know, I've talked to folks who talk about the winter biomass or the grass biomass that come off after a corn harvest and have pigweeds, and being able to use that as a winter cover. You got to use a program to combat it. There's the seed right there. That's what's scary. It's the size of this seed, and it'll stick to you like it's a doggone cucumber. You can move it around. What are your options? Tillage, mowing or shredding, paraquat application with a potential residual. So when? At least once a month. Why? I just told you why. Pigweeds at about a month, 5 weeks at the most, you got viable seed. Barnyard grass is right behind it. Brown top millets are in there mixed with it. You've got tea weed that's moving along that could be a potential problem as well. Performing one of these options helps to prevent that seed production, and it also works to slow production of other weeds. So here's an example. You harvest corn August 17th. Next week, 24th to 28th, you mow or you shred it. You spread that corn stover. Helps it rot, right? About a month later, you come in with tillage. You may not disc it. You may just re-hip it. But you're destroying weeds here. You're destroying weeds here. And then we're out in October. Paraquat plus residuals, such as Valor Lead Off. And I told a group of guys yesterday when I was talking about general weed control, this lines up really nicely for when you would be putting out something for glyphosate-resistant Italian ryegrass control. Because ryegrass is starting to emerge. This is on the front end of it because it emerges through November. But you put a herbicide out to prevent that. If you do this now, not only are you stopping summer annual weeds from making weed seed, you're actually shutting henbit down too. So you think, well, I don't want to erode. If you use something like paraquat and say dual magnum, it's going to be gone by the 1st of December, 2nd week of December, and that's when you're going to have POA and other things come up to help you with your erosion control. Or if you use a cover crop, like Dr. Josh Copes has shown a significant amount of data, plant a cover crop and spray residual herbicide into a standing cover crop. That does a great job as well. But the whole point is this amount of time from August on out here to October. And we haven't even got to a killing frost yet. So in conclusion, preventing weeds from producing seed for harvest does 2 things. Reduces the soil seed bank, reduces the number of weeds that you got to face next year. You're taking some pins out of the pin cushion instead of sitting on them. 1 cycle per year is not going to be enough. I know you rotate corn, so following corn, that's a good time to manage this. This practice needs to be done every year. If you want to do this, this is something you've got to adopt and you got to do. Because when you don't, you may think, well, I don't have a pigweed, or there's one pigweed gets by. Does everybody see that pigweed right there in that cotton field? So we've just rotated this cornfield to cotton next year. And that was 1 pigweed there that you didn't do anything about. Well, guess what you got to deal with now in this cotton crop? Well, I don't grow cotton, I grow soybeans. Change that to soybeans, be the same. This is putting the rubber to the road when it can affect you. Because what are you going to do right there? My advice right here is go pull every one of them. Don't try to fight with a herbicide. So with that, I thank you for your time. It was short and it was sweet. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
Is there a conflict between cover crop management and vegetation management?
Is there a conflict?
Yeah.
Conflict when? In the fall or in the spring?
In the fall, will that hamper your vegetation management if you've got a cover crop out there?
What kind of vegetation are you talking about managing? The cover crop vegetation? I'm sorry.
Your row crop vegetation that you got to put up with in the spring. If you plant a cover crop out there, that's going to keep you from doing a lot of herbicide work in the fall.
Absolutely, but you've got something to compete with those weeds then and can shade. You can use that cover crop almost as a smother crop. There is an advantage to that. So if you were to harvest the corn in August, and then you plant, say, in September, say a rye cover crop or a mixture, you could remove these other things that I'm talking about here and use that to your advantage of competing against the weeds.
The cover crop and your vegetation management is compatible.
Yes. in my opinion. If I understand vegetative management, they'd be the same. Talking about weed vegetation management, yes, they are compatible. That's the one place I see cover crops from my standpoint. You got to treat it like pine straw. Yes, sir.
You need to kill your weeds before you plant the cover crop.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You gotta kill your weeds first.
Yeah, and if you got a pigweed this big and you plant cereal rye into it, don't expect the cereal rye to do anything. It's going to hurt the rye worse. But if you got it removed and eliminated.
Got another question?
Yes, sir.
The following spring, can you plant your crop into that green cover crop and then terminate? Or is this man gonna talk about that?
He's going to talk about it, and I've got my opinions. So,
Have you ever seen it done?
yeah,
It works.
yeah,
To me, 'cause I do.
yeah, it can work. It can work. The best way that the cover crop helps weed management in that standpoint is if you've got it thick enough and it's like pine straw. If it's a thin stand of a cover crop, it's not doing you any good. It does, the biomass from a cover crop does affect the activity of residual herbicides. It decreases them. So you have to understand that you're almost moving to a total post-emergence program. And if you have a significant amount of resistance, you are painting yourself into a corner. That's not to say cover crops don't work, because they will. But you've got to have the proper stand, in my opinion.
And we do have options with chemicals to cover crops if you manage it right.
For example, your green biomass. If you were to try to spray S-metolachlor, any formulation to do, you're wasting your money. Because as soon as it hits that green biomass, it's stuck. It ain't going anywhere. Don't wash off. When the biomass dies, it doesn't leach out. So those are some examples. So you've got to know what herbicides you can use in that situation. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay.